Hello and welcome to another edition of Metal Roots. I am your host Wade, and tonight I am joined by the one and the only Todd Michael Hall from bands such as Riot V, Jack Starr's Burning Starr, Reverence, just to name a few. Great singers. So tonight we're just going to dive into Todd's background a little bit and find out what makes him tick and why heavy metal. So I guess my first question for you, Todd, would be, did you grow up in a musical household? Did you play, if either of your parents play an instrument, anything like that?
Yeah, not really. Oddly enough, there was music around because my mom loved to listen to music, Um, but yeah, my dad, for him, music is just this thing that's in the background. He's, it doesn't really,
Yeah.
it's not really a consumer, I guess you'd say. But mom always did. I remember, my family, we had like 4 kids within 4 years of each other, and then I have a younger sister who came along, 13 and a half years later. So, but the first four of us, all within 4 years, we'd all be crammed into whatever, this little white Cadillac with the faux red leather interior and had the 8-track cassette. And the funny thing is, I remember it being pretty varied. My mom would listen to like Tom T. Hall. She'd listen to Bread. She'd listen to like Rolling Stones, Deep Purple. It was amazing.
Okay.
Even Kiss. It was like, so it was a pretty good mixture. But I just John Denver too, obviously. And I just remember everybody kind of singing along on the drives up to Mackinac City, up in the northern part of Michigan and stuff like that, because that's where her family was from. And so yeah, I guess in that regard, kind of musical. But then also my older brother, who was 4 years older than me, he started taking guitar lessons, and he was pretty young. I can't remember exactly when. I was thinking maybe it was as young as 9, but certainly by 10, 11, 12 in that area. And so that would have been when I was quite young, in that 5 to
Sure.
7 range. And we went to Catholic schools when I was younger. They always had music programs, and the teacher that would play the piano and sing along. And so yeah, I think it feels to me like music has always kind of been there, even though my mom and dad per se weren't necessarily very musical.
Now, do you remember maybe one of the first bands that you gravitated to, even as a little kid? Maybe something that kind of struck you that you're like, "Oh, this is pretty cool. I want to listen to this more."
Well, honestly, I go so far back. Really, what happened is I started taking piano when I was like 9 years old, and that would have been, 78-ish, 77, 78. And so actually at the time I was kind of into like Barry Manilow. I remember falling in love with Lionel Richie and just kind of crap like that, really. The Commodores and stuff. I don't know. I just remember goofy stuff like that. Obviously, John Denver and stuff way
Sure.
back then, and Bread. What happened to me though is like, so as we transition, my brother's a little bit older, so in the late 70s, and then as we transitioned in the 80s, my brother became a big fan of. First, it was Ted Nugent. And then it was, and then I got into Van Halen pretty good. And then my other older brother was getting into Styx and REO Speedwagon and stuff like that. So that's when so to me, as far as like rock bands, those are the kind of the first ones that I would think. Like actually, my first concert was Ted Nugent. So
Oh, wow, that's pretty cool.
I think I was 13, and my mom took me.
Awesome.
Too. So.
Yeah. Well, my mom never took me to a rock concert when I was younger, but she did go. Remember when you used to have to go to like Bergner's because they were like a Ticketmaster outlet or whatever and stand in line at Bergner's. So I was in high school, and she went and stood in line with all these long-haired rockers and stuff to get me tickets to Sammy Hagar and Dokken.
Oh, wow. Nice.
I was at school, and she's like, "Well, I can go and get in line early in the morning," and so she got me my Dokken and Sammy Hagar tickets.
Yeah, here in Saginaw at the mall, we had Hudson's, which is nowadays Macy's, I guess. And I remember they used to have like a little ticket office upstairs, and that's where people would go a lot of times to get tickets to concerts.
Yeah.
Back when it was like $11 for a ticket and
Oh, right, exactly.
10 service charge, or whatever.
Yeah. My first big rock concert, as a kid, was Def Leppard on the Pyromania tour, and I think the ticket was probably $10 or $11, and the T-shirt was the same, like $10 or $11. So yeah, the whole night was like $20, and my times have changed. So
One of the bands that I remember early on, definitely Van Halen, but another one that stuck out to me was Quiet Riot. And like, it wasn't like I was this big, huge fan of Quiet Riot, but they just got so big and so huge off those few songs and that one album. I remember, I remember going to like a dance at the high school, or I was in, what was I in? I think I was in ninth grade, and so I was in ninth grade, and I remember them jamming that, and they actually came to somewhere, the Pontiac Silverdome or something, I don't know, and I didn't go, but I remember there was a couple people in the class that went, and I remember them jamming it, and everybody jamming the,
Oh
metal
yeah,
health or whatever. And,
that album was huge. Yeah, I mean
yeah,
it kind of changed the course of
astronomical.
things. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it was so big, and but it's weird because we had those. Another one that stuck out to me too was like Motley Crue, that first album of theirs, "Too Fast for Love." My God, that was just such a great album. I remember sitting at my buddy Bob's house and playing it on a turntable,
Yeah.
and just yeah. So I don't know. Yeah, just a lot of good music, a lot of good memories of that.
So what was it in particular that drew you to like hard rock or heavy metal, and something about the guitars or the vocals or anything in particular that just made you think, I kind of like this metal stuff a little more?
Well, I think for me, I was always, I like, I have a very clean voice, so I was kind of gravitated toward the singers that were like that, and a lot of that was popular, anyway, because if you think of like Boston and REO Speedwagon and
Oh yeah,
Styx and all those types of bands, Triumph and Rush and whatever, um, and so, and I think for me, like, okay, so I was already kind of liking that, but that was just so big. And then what happened is, it seemed like all that metal started to come in because it first kind of started out as hard rock and then it transitioned into metal. And what was weird is it was almost like that's what rock became.
hmm
Is because metal was just so freaking big at the time. Like, why wouldn't you be listening to it? And there was all these great singers, obviously, with Bruce Dickinson and Jeff Tate and Ronnie James Dio and all these people. So I think for me it was like I back at the time. What's funny is you look at it now and it feels like rock is kind of underground in ways and stuff.
yeah,
Obviously not somebody like Foo Fighters or whatever have you, but really hip hop and rap and everything rules so much, the cultural
exactly.
thing, that it's hard to imagine that it was so much the other way before. Like, I mean, rock was it,
Yeah.
it was the shit, that's what everybody listened to.
Yeah, I'm always still surprised by that because a car will go past me, and every time I hear a car cranking music as rap or hip hop, I never hear a car going past me blasting like even Metallica or something that's really
Yeah.
popular. But when I was in high school, I mean, every car going past me was playing like hard rock or heavy metal, or at least good rock like Foreigner or Journey or Styx, like you said,
Yeah.
or something like that. But you don't hear that getting cranked out the car windows anymore.
Yeah, and I think part of it was too, like, you really liked Foreigner and Journey and stuff like that, but I think what happened is, like, for me, being an impressionable teenager, kid, whatever have you, um, the stuff that was on the radio, there was almost like this, well, I don't really want to listen to stuff on the radio. I want to listen to stuff that nobody else is listening to. And a lot of the heavy metal was like that. So that's why, and not my oldest brother, but my next up older brother, Rick, he was kind of part owner of a record store. And so, it's all of a sudden they've got a box of cassettes sitting there and they're for sale for $5 because it's the band Sword and it was their metalized album. And
Oh yeah,
the record label was trying to get them out and get them known. So I picked up that cassette and it was like Warrior and Malice and Q5 and all these strange,
sure.
TNT and all these bands that they weren't on the radio. Nobody was thinking about it. And there was something cool about having this awesome music with these great singers that, that nobody was really listening to. Like, I remember having this argument with Sarah Mull in high school about how she thought Steve Perry was so awesome. I'm like, yeah, but Tony Harnell from TNT, and I was playing her songs, she was playing me songs, and we're arguing about who was the best singer and all that stuff. And so I think that was one of the things that maybe gravitated me toward the metal too. Is just that there were just so many bands and so many great bands that weren't necessarily on the radio, and there was something kind of rebellious about it, I guess, in a way.
Exactly. I mean, that's what I loved about it too, because every time you went to the record store, it was like an adventure. Because I remember buying the first Lizzie Borden album. You
Yeah,
couldn't hear the stuff. You just had to take a chance on it. It's like, oh, this is a cool cover. It's got Axe on the cover or whatever,
exactly.
or buying the first Man of War album, or you name it, Raven, things like that, and this was just all this new music coming out, new styles. I mean, there was speed metal and there was thrash metal and there was, you name progressive metal. And yeah, it was just an exciting time because everything was just, there was no limits, I guess. Right.
Oh, yeah, yeah, definitely. And the album cover artwork was so important. That's why Riot gets teased because that Fire Down Under album with the Seal dude on the front, and everybody's like, "Man, that's one of the worst." But actually, I was teasing Jack Starr too because he came out with a solo album in 1984, And it was actually a pretty rockin' great album, but he's just on the cover holding like a Strat and wearing a fedora.
Yeah.
And it was like, it looked like a blues album or something. And I remember my brother Rick saying, hey, at his record store, like, you should buy this. It's got Rhett Forster on vocals, and he's a great singer. You should buy it. And I remember looking at the cover thinking, really? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, all right. And years later, I got to tease Jack about it. I was like, man, Jack, that cover, you'd probably sell a lot more albums if you had a cooler cover.
Exactly.
And he agreed. So
yeah. Well, it's like you and I are talked about before I hit record, like all these covers I have on the wall here. I mean, album art in heavy metal and hard rock is important, right? It's part of the whole package, I love getting an album where it's got a 20-page booklet and cool artwork and, the lyrics and the liner notes and just all that, which, I feel like some genres don't maybe put as much into the cover art. It's just a picture of the artist on the cover or whatever.
yeah.
And, but I love, unique, cool cover art.
That's why the streaming thing is, I still don't, buy, I still don't have a streaming subscription or whatever. And I don't necessarily consume a ton of music because obviously I'm working on music a lot and stuff. But I still like to buy CDs and have the booklet and have the physical thing on them. Just
Sure.
I think that's part of the reason vinyls are so popular nowadays, because people just want to have something to hold and put up on
Yeah.
their wall or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah, I think about some of the cool gatefold albums that came out in like the 70s where, it was a continuation of the artwork. So you open it up, it was like one big mural, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Just those things are kind of missing sometimes nowadays in the album world. So I was going to ask you, do you remember the first album you bought with your own money? Like maybe you were a kid doing a, paper route or something. You saved up your pennies to go and buy the new whoever album.
Oh yeah, I do actually. It's pretty stupid actually. It was because I really didn't have a lot of vinyls because I transitioned to cassettes pretty quickly. But the very first one that I ever, like, the first album that I had was Man of War, Hail to England.
Okay.
But I got that for a present. And the first album vinyl that I actually went and bought was, believe it or not, a band called Axe, and the name of the album was Nemesis.
Okay.
And like I literally went into like Spencer's or whatever the name of the record store was in the mall. Oh, Camelot. Sorry, it was called Camelot. And I went in there, and I think I was with a brother or something. And I had enough money to buy an album, and I remember looking through, and my brother, because it was exactly like you said, you're just looking at covers, you can't listen to music, you don't know what it's like, and you're like, all right, well, and it had like an alien or something on it. And I remember thinking, all right, I'll give this a shot and buy it. And it was okay. I don't even remember a song on it now. So it wasn't like I hit the gold mine like buying Peace of Mind for my first album.
Right. So now, when did you actually decide to start singing, or did you sing as a kid in choir or anything like that?
I've been singing I've enjoyed singing forever. When I was in kindergarten, my kindergarten teacher told my mom she thought I had a good voice and I could stay in key real nice and stuff. And so my mom figured, my mom always loved piano music, so she figured, so she started me in piano when I was 9. But I really didn't. I didn't want to do the theory, and I didn't really, and I took till I was 13. But the last year or two, like, I barely ever practiced it. I just played it by ear and whatever. But I used to sing academic track in school. I remember when I was in 7th grade, I sang the theme that I was a late bloomer. In 7th grade, I was still quite a little boy, and I sang Tomorrow, the theme song from Annie, and a cappella in academic track. Never did win. I think the next year I sang Open Arms by Journey.
Okay.
And then, by the time I was 15, I played out. So actually, this like January, February will be my 40th anniversary of the first time I played out live with a band.
Yeah, that's cool.
Because my older brother had a band, and believe it or not, when I was 15, they somehow didn't have a singer, and somehow I was kind of old enough looking. I wasn't very old looking. I was 15 looking probably 13, but I had, I remember we played out, and it was back then. It would have been in 1984, and it was like kind of a mixture of 84, beginning of 85, and it was like a mixture. We'd do like Bryan Adams, but we would do Pretty Maids, Red Hot and Heavy, Twisted Sister. It was just this weird eclectic mix of rock, but starting to lean into heavy metal because some of those bands are starting to get popular, and so yeah, I did that, and then I wasn't. It wasn't very long. I was in high school at the time, and we'd get home really late on school nights and stuff, and it was kind of stupid in a way. Um, so I didn't do it very long. I did it a few months, and I can't remember exactly why I burned out or whatever. But uh, and so what happened then is I got out. And my brother John kind of kept going with some other people, and another guy started singing and whatnot have you. And then I got in exploratory mode because by then I had started learning about head voice. So what had happened is I could sing really high. I went through puberty, and then I lost the ability to sing really, really high. Um, and so what happened is I started, I was getting influenced by Jeff Tate and different people, and wanting to learn how to sing that way, and asking various singers. And I even took vocal lessons from a local opera teacher lady, trying to see if she could teach me how to access my head voice that people were telling me about and all this stuff. And it ended up, I really was just driving around in my car singing along to cassette tapes all the time, as I drove around. And I finally I don't know, I was singing the beginning of Take Hold of the Flame, and I went up and hit that big note at the beginning. I was like, oh, what, how did I do that? Like, I didn't even, and to this day, I cannot tell you how I do what I do. I have no idea. I mean, I can throw out some words and things that might sound good, but I have people ask me too, can you teach me? I'm like, nope, I have no idea, because I really don't know. I know that obviously I'm shifting my voice from my chest voice, and I know what mixed voice is, and I know what head voice is because I feel it when I do it, and I know when I'm in it, and I know when I'm in falsetto instead of head voice. Pretty easy to tell because falsetto is a lot lighter. But like, I don't know how to tell you to do it. There's this place you got to put your voice, and I don't know how to tell you.
Well, I mean, it's impressive because, first album, of course, I heard of Riot with you was Unleash the Fire. But when I saw live clips of you doing Thundersteel and taking it up, I swear, even maybe higher than Tony Moore, that last note.
I mean, the first album that I ever recorded, I learned how to sing higher like that, and then my brother decided my brother kept oscillating. We'll play some cover tunes, let's do originals, play some cover. And then, so about the time I was a senior in high school, he decided he wanted to start doing originals again. And then I had learned how to sing higher, and he was kind of digging it. So we started writing together, and so we recorded a demo tape with like 6 songs on it when I was about 17, I think. And then we recorded 25 Gets a Ride with Harlot when I was 18. So we recorded a full album. So there's plenty of stupid high singing on that one. Back then it was like, oh, I learned how to sing high, so I'm going to impress the whole world and sing high a lot and hold lots of high notes and do this, do that. And now I'm kind of, I don't want to say I'm over it. I still love to sing high, but I just really want to write a good song. Like, I really don't. I don't really. I don't care if there's always going to be a higher singer or whatever, so that's not, what I want is to write a song that, impacts people and all over the world. To me, that'd be more.
Sure.
My wife's from the northeastern part of India, and when we were courting way back in the 90s, and I would fly over to meet her, she lived in Kathmandu, Nepal for a while. And there's this labyrinth like part of Kathmandu called Tunel. It's kind of a lot of the tourists hang out. There's hotels and shops and bakeries and whatever and all sorts of stuff and restaurants but it's like these narrow little streets, and there's people walking through in tiny cars trying to make it, and honking horns and noisy and smells and this and that. And what's funny is there'll be these record stores, and a lot of times, or in tape stores, and a lot of times it was just like bootlegs too. Nothing was legit, but they'd have music pumping out, and I remember going around and like hearing, songs by Kansas and stuff like that. And I mean, mind you, you're in Kathmandu, Nepal. Now, granted, they're probably trying to play music that appeals to Westerners, but because there's a lot of Western tourists there. But still, to me, that's pretty impressive. When you can write a song that decades later they're still playing it in Kathmandu, Nepal, So to me, that's cooler than. Now, it just so happens the guy from Kansas has a stellar voice too, but to me, I think writing a great song is more fun at this point than trying to be the best singer in the world.
Sure. Well, you make a good point because I mean, you know, you can go to, I don't care, name a country, and chances are they know "Sweet Home Alabama," right? I mean, just everybody knows that song, or you know, some song like that that stands the test of time and still is popular on rock radio and still gets
Yeah,
a lot of play, and you know,
yeah, and it's hard. I think nowadays I don't even know how possible that is even nowadays because it seems like the music scene is so splintered now. I think back then it was kind of like, well, you know, there was some country and there's some this, but you know, there wasn't as many different things and genres. And
right?
so I think it could be this big thing that everybody knew. I mean, what's so weird nowadays is you can find people on Spotify that have 1 million monthly listeners and you have no clue who these people are. Like, and there's a lot of them.
Yeah,
Like, I don't even know how that happens. It's just crazy. Like, you're like, really? Like, who is this cat? I mean, what is this music? And they have 1 million monthly listeners. Like, okay, you
yeah,
know.
exactly. So let's talk a little bit about your musical journey. So you had Harlot, your first band. So then, when did you get into you went? So you went from Harlot. Was it Jack Starr's Burning Starr? The next thing?
Yeah, it really was in a way. So like we started Harlot and recorded our first album when I was like freshman in college. And then by the time I graduated college, it was 91. So we were playing clubs in Detroit and all that stuff. But by the time I graduated college, it was spring of 91. And so the music scene was changing. And then we were also like, my brother was like, well, why don't we focus? Because I got a job in the family business. So, I came back home, whatever. Um, and and we were like, why don't we play some cover tunes again? Because that'll get us out playing bars and help us build up our following, so that when we record our next album, we'll try to sell it. And so we did that, um, and yeah, that'll rip your soul out. I think if you're really wanting to play original music and you're playing a bunch of covers and thinking the covers are going to get you the original music, it really doesn't. You pretty
Yeah,
much because when you're in a situation where you're playing covers, people generally don't want to hear your originals. You'd slide one in now and then, and nobody gives a shit and whatever. But we did end up recording another album, and we released it in 1994. But the name of the band was Pulling Teeth. We changed, we felt like Harlot wasn't appropriate anymore or whatever, and we changed the name of the Pulling Teeth. And then I don't know, about 6 months or a year afterwards, pretty much disbanded. And so I was kind of done. And in 1996. I decided that's when I picked up guitar, started taking guitar lessons, because I had musical motivations, and my brother John was always responsible for music, and I was lyrics and vocal melodies, and without him, I was like, well, I've got these ideas, so let me pick up guitar myself, and I can play guitar. I'm a bit of a hack. I'm not like a soloist or anything. I can play chords and I can write music, but
hmm,
I think that's what I wanted more than anything, is be able to put together chords to support all the melodies and ideas that I
sure.
got. And so what happened then is I really wasn't doing much of anything. Nobody was terribly interested. Nobody was asking. But I think long about 2000, I was kind of starting to reach out a little bit. I look back and I can't remember who all, but there was a couple little bands that were looking for singers, and I would maybe drop something here and there. But then long about 2004, that's when it's actually 20 years. Memorial Day weekend, I did a post. Was 20 years since I got a call from Joey DeMayo's um, uh, assistant, I guess you'd say, hey, Joey DeMayo wants to arrange a phone call with you. And I'm like, oh, yeah. Well, that's because my brother Rick had talked me, my older brother that owned the record store and stuff, not the one in the band with me, but he had told me about this notion that Jack Starr was looking for a singer, and that it was to be on a record label, Magic Circle Music, owned by the members of Manowar or whatever. And I was a huge Manowar fan. So was my brother, and so and I liked Jack Starr's one album. So I thought, well, what the hell? I remember my brother Rick saying, well, if anybody can appreciate your style of singing, it's these cats. And I sent it in, and the people, Noel at the record at Magic Circle Music that works with Joey, he heard it, like my singing, passed it to Joey and said, yeah, I think you might like this guy. And Joey did. He heard it and he really liked me, and so that he called me up and said I was a diamond in the rough and blah blah blah. He wanted me to fly to their studio and meet him, and da da da. And I remember being like, well, if I'm going to fly there, is there any way I can meet Eric while I'm there? And so he
Right.
made arrangements so that Eric came in the studio while I was there, and we talked it up. And then Eric sat in the sound booth or whatever you want to call it while I was singing and recording
No
some
pressure
vocals.
there.
Yeah, dude, that was like it was mind blowing. It was like, I mean, since basically '83, my two favorite singers was Jeff Tate and Eric Adams. I mean, without a doubt. I mean, not that I didn't love Dio and Bruce Dickinson's awesome. And there was lots of great singers that influenced me. Don't get me wrong, but those were the two that I just had so many albums of that I loved. So yeah, it was very bizarre. And so yeah, so that was 2004, and I started working on the albums, but then there were delays and weird things, and Jack went off and did a country band for a little while and all sorts of weird stuff. So our album actually didn't even come out till 2009. That's
Okay.
how long it took. And so, but I played over in Germany, the Magic Circle Festival in 2008, my first, like international show, and then played again in 2009. Yeah, we put that album out. Then we left Magic Circle Music, put out another album, Land of the Dead. That was produced by Bart Gabriel, who is from Poland. His wife, Marta Gabriel, has the band Crystal Viper.
Yep.
And Bart produced the album, and then he lined up some shows for us. So we played the Keep It True Festival. We played a couple shows in Greece and one in Italy with Burning Starr. And when we did, and we got done with that, and after I met Bart, I remember it was like shortly after I got home in the spring of 2013, he was like, "Hey, did you know that Riot's looking for a singer?" And I'm like, "Riot?" I'm like, "Mark Reale passed away. I thought that was kind of done." And he's like, "No." He's like, the guys, are trying to, make it continue, and they're looking for somebody. And I remember asking him, I was like, "Well, wouldn't it be weird?" Because I was actually in Reverence at the time too. So I had a Reverence, and I'm like, "Isn't it gonna be weird if I'm in too many bands?" And he's like, "Well, Todd," he's like, "Riot's like a legend, so I think you definitely would want to be in Riot. And so yeah, I started talking with him, and by the fall they announced me as the new singer and stuff. So
Yeah, I wonder how that came about because I didn't know if you had any prior knowledge of those guys, or had you paths crossed or something? Did you know Mike Flint's or?
No, I didn't know anybody. It was exactly that, because Bart Gabriel he wanted to produce a Riot album. So he was talking to Donnie Van Staveren, and Donnie was looking for singers, and Bart was trying to locate singers for him. And he kept suggesting he suggested a few people from Europe, but I remember Donnie was like, "Yeah, it was too hard to work for people from Europe." And so Bart ended up suggesting me. And so I started by recording, I think it was 2, maybe 3 songs off of Immortal Soul, which frankly Riot had escaped me. I didn't remember Riot really since Privilege of Power. I didn't pay attention to any of the Mike DeMeo albums at the time. And it was the '90s. I was listening to friggin' Counting Crows and Seal and God knows what. I mean, I was still listening to some metal, but there just wasn't a lot out. It didn't seem like to me. Not here in the U.S. But in any event, yeah. I wasn't aware of the Immortal Soul album, the Thundersteel reunion and all that. I just, I was busy. You got to understand, like, I work a lot, and then I had a family and little kids, and I was doing my own music, had 2 bands going. So, but in any event, so I recorded 3. I put vocals on 3 of the songs from Immortal Soul, and it was funny because Donnie actually posted, I think one of the songs said, "Hey, posted," and everybody's like, "Yeah, what?" And he's like, "Well, this is like our new singer," and people were like, "What?" They thought it was Tony, and I don't sound exactly like Tony, but enough that probably people that don't pay close attention maybe can be fooled, So,
So was that kind of an eye opener to you? So, like you said, it was the 2000s and 90s. Metal was sort of back to the underground in America. It wasn't in vogue. And then you go to play these fests in Europe, and it's like these rabid fans are there, and there's tons of people. Is that sort of like, oh, something's going on here?
yeah, I think for me it's like, and then obviously in the later '90s, I think a buddy, Todd Walraven, who was a friend of mine that kind of played with me in Harlot, but the later years Harlot, when we were doing the cover tune band thing in the early '90s and stuff, and then again in 2006. I think it was in the latter '90s. I think he talked me into buying a Primal Fear album, and so yeah, there were some ones, and so I kind of had this thought that, oh wow, it's interesting because these bands are still kind of popular in Europe. Like, what kind of cracks me up? You say you like Hammerfall, but the reality is, like, to me, Hammerfall is basically Thundersteel Riot. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's kind of, and I'm not trying to diss them at all, but part of the reason I say that is because Joachim he and Donnie talk now and then, and he tells Donnie that he absolutely loves Thundersteel, and it was a huge influence on him. And when we put out the Unleash the Fire album, Joaquin actually reached out to him and said, "Hey, great job, man! This album's great," and stuff. So I'm not dissing Hammerfall at all, but I'm just saying it's kind of funny to me because it feels what happened to Riot is they put out those two albums that were in the power metal thing, but then when they got Mike DeMeo, the music changed a little bit. And I'm not saying it didn't have a power metal vibe, and I'm not saying the music was no good because it was great or whatever, but it wasn't the same as Thundersteel and the high singing privilege. And so what happened is all of a sudden you had other bands that kind of came out, and it feels like they kind of filled the void where Riot, kind of maybe could have kept some of that if they would have kept going with it. I don't know, what it is. It's all conjecture. I mean, to me, it's bands like Primal Fear, but then they came out of what was Gamma Ray and all that kind of stuff. So Halloween and who knows? Why is one band popular and one band not and all that? I can't even begin to fathom it.
Yeah.
But yeah, there. I think I had this notion that there's kind of a little bit going on over here in Europe, and but yeah, you go to the Keep It True festival. When we did that in 2013 with Burning Starr, I mean, granted we were a little lower on the bill, so we weren't the headliner, but it was amazing. There was 2,000 people there, and maybe it wasn't totally full for us, but it was pretty damn full. And I remember thinking, wow, that's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was definitely interesting. So one of the things is like when I first joined Riot, my experience was Burning Starr, and we only had played a small handful of shows and generally didn't play any. And then even in Reverence, we did line up one kind of tour of Europe, but in general, we really didn't play much of any shows. So to me, it was kind of like, okay, I'll be in Riot. We'll make an album. Maybe now and then we'll play a show. Well, then what happened is, we started playing some shows in 2014, and then immediately people were like liking it. Like, oh wow, this is cool. And so we started getting more show offers, and then we reached a point where we're playing 6 or 8 weeks worth of shows, not all at once, but over the course of the year. And that's when I had to start jettisoning these other bands, because I was just like, guys, like, I'm not going to play live with you, I don't think, because I mean I could just only take so much time with my feet on the work. Sure. And so that's really what ended up happening. I mean, I felt bad. I mean, I disappointed a couple people here and there, especially Reverence. They were pretty bummed at first, but Brian and I are still on talking terms and stuff. And even with Jack Starr, like, in Ned, I'm still on good terms with them too. So I actually, the Stand Your Ground album, the third one I did, I had already told them, like, and I even said, like, should you go get another singer, because I'm not going to play live with you. And they said, no, we want you to do it. So I recorded it. Probably helped that I was free,
Yeah.
Free, and I didn't charge them for it.
Now with Jack Starr, you talked about his solo album with Rhett singing on it, but were you familiar with his work from Virgin Steel? Did you know of him from that?
I was not. Like, I was familiar with Virgin Steel because I remember the album cover with the sword and stuff on it, but I was a Manowar guy, not a Virgin Steel guy. And I know to some people, like, they're more Virgin Steel than Manowar, or to others, they kind of consider them somewhat equivalent. But yeah, no, I hadn't consumed much of any Virgin Steel. So
okay.
Wasn't very familiar with it. And then he even had Burning Starr, and frankly, I wasn't much of. I remember seeing the cover, Rock the American Way, and just some stuff like that at the record store, but I never really listened to it. Although Mike Torelli is an awesome singer, and he was really lighting it up back then. So I'm surprised I didn't listen to it, because it's probably something I would have really dug back in my 80s, when I was listening to and absorbing all these great singers.
Sure. So I was going to ask, so with Riot, I don't know where all the guys live. You're in Michigan, but I have no idea where the rest of the guys in Riot live. So how do you guys go about songwriting? Because obviously you're not together. You can't get together every week, Wednesday night at like your house and jam or something. So how's that kind of work for you?
I mean, I think it just depends on the bands. Some bands, like, I know for the Immortal Soul album, they did that. They all went to some place in Texas or something, and they just got in the studio and they just jammed together and did all that, and that's how they kind of wrote songs. I don't know how much I've experienced that. I mean, my experience with music has been a little more. There's one person that'll, is more of a principal songwriter, and they'll write some songs. So my brother was kind of like that, where he'd come in and he would just have a song kind of written.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and that's how it's been with me, So like, Jack and Ned would work together. They are out of Florida, and I was out of Michigan, so we couldn't really jam together. So generally speaking, they would throw me music, and I would put vocals on it. Reverence was the same way. Brian was from Kalamazoo, which isn't that far, but he would, send me music. I'd write lyrics and vocal melodies. And then with Riot, it's kind of much the same, but every now and then, we. So what happens is, like, you really have two principal music writers in Riot, and that's Donnie and Mike Flins. Now, Frank's capable of writing music. I'm capable of writing music, and actually Nick is capable of writing music. It's just that, they kind of know the Riot special sauce, so I don't know if ours break
Yeah.
in. So like there was a couple songs that I kind of submitted for this latest Riot album, but Donnie took and to his credit, he took them and tried to transfer my ideas, the chords and stuff that I wrote into something. I didn't know if I was real convinced. It felt stiffer. I wanted to have more of a looser feel to it, so to speak, a more of a grooving kind of feel than what he was doing. And but they just didn't get developed. And some of it too. I mean, I won't. I mean, and I don't. I guess I don't mean to make this sound bad, but there's a competitive element to it, or like an egotistical element to it. And Donnie and Mike, it's bad enough those two. Like, I want my songs on the album. I want my songs. So to let me in there trying to get one of my songs on the album, it's like now they've got to be willing to let me do it too. And not that I'm not that worried about, because when I write music, I'm pretty simple with music, and I tend to be more of a pop writer anyway. So I'm not stressed out about it, and they give me great opportunities to come up with vocal melodies and lyrics. I write lots of lyrics for the album, so I feel like I'm contributing. But I will say that's important to me. I don't like to be in a band where I don't get to contribute at all. And Burning Starr was a little bit like that, because, and no offense to Jack and Ned, it's just that they would work on stuff down there, and then they couldn't help themselves. They'd start writing lyrics and stuff, and so I was more like cleanup duty. The lyrics weren't that good, and I got to fix them, or whatever. They're not complete, and I got to finish them and stuff like that. But it wasn't like, hey Todd, write us some great vocal melodies, or something. I didn't get much of that. But yeah, so right now, yeah, we don't really get together and jam as a band unless the song becomes problematic. So like a good example on our latest album, it's actually kind of my favorite song on the album, but whatever. It's hard to have a favorite because I like quite a few of them, obviously. But like Love Beyond the Grave, I think it's just a great, great song. And when I worked on it for years, and the song was called Part of Me, and when Mike originally wrote it, it had that intro, and then it got into that, that real heavy head riff. But then when it got to the chorus, like and the verse was the same as it, but then when he got to the chorus, it just, I don't know, it broke down to like almost like this mellow, I don't even know what it was. And I was like, man, this is horrible, Mike. It's horrible. Like I wrote lyrics and vocal melodies for it, and even did melodies he suggested, and I tried, but I just kept saying, I was like, Mike, this is terrible. And then I'm like, why don't you do something like this? And so he changed and tried to write the music that I was kind of saying to him, and that wasn't any good. And then he wrote something else, which was basically kind of like the intro, but done as the chorus. And I'm like, Mike, this is terrible. And I said, it's so depressing. Your head riff is so awesome. It's just so incredibly awesome. But it was like rock. It was like this rock head riff. And then he would go into, I don't know what you would call it on the chorus. And finally I was just like, just throw the song out. I'm done. And so as a band, we got together, we had a show. I remember we had one here in Saginaw, and we were all talking about it and doing stuff. And Donnie was like, man, I think you should just use the head riff for the chorus. And then Frank was like, yeah. I mean, I said, Frank, man, can you just help? I'm so burnt out on this song. So Frank actually took it and he cut it up and pasted up, cut it up in, digitally, and rearranged it so that the head riff would be the chorus. And then he came up with this lyrical concept of Love Beyond the Grave and all that. And then actually Donnie came in and he goes, because we came up with some different chorus melodies, and Donnie's like, no, man, I think it should just be something like Love from Beyond the Grave. And so Donnie thought of that, and all the other vocal melodies, Frank's lyrics, and Mike really had a lot of ideas on vocal melodies. I had ideas on vocal melodies, but I was taking it more of a rock path. and I was pushing for my melodies at first, but then after I listened to Mike's more and thought about it more, I'm like, Mike's melodies don't sound like something I would sing. So because of that, I think maybe I should sing them because I want to do something different,
Yeah.
Um, and in a way, that song is it's kind of goofy because it's definitely a hard rocking song, but like you get to that pre-chorus and it's got a really pretty melody on it. So it's almost like a juxtaposition because you've got this really melodic but hard and heavy song. So
Yeah.
But Riot's all about melody. That's my favorite. One of my favorite things about Riot is, well, first of all, if they appreciate a clean singer, because I have a really clean voice. So I mean, that's my favorite thing. I feel like I'm at home. But the thing I love about Riot is just the melody. I mean, you can have these pounding. Like you listen to Black Leather and Glittering
Oh,
Steel. We drank till the sunrise, rode away singing Johnny's back again. You listen to these melodies and hear you on this music just going, and you get this beautiful soaring melody. And to me, there's just tons and tons of great melodies in Riot. And that's my favorite thing.
well, exactly. That's what I think what you were talking about earlier is like sort of that's I think what modern power metal grabbed from is sort of that type of metal where it's like, yes, it's pounding and it's heavy and it's aggressive, but it's still got that killer chorus, that infectious groove, whatever, that melody that I feel like a lot of the modern heavy music is missing because it's just we're trying to be so heavy that we're throwing melody and everything else out.
To me, and maybe it's because I can't. I love to sing along with stuff. I have trouble listening to stuff, especially when it sounds like someone's just screaming at me. It's like, God, I'm that mad. Like, come on, can I just enjoy this music? It's like you're pissed. Sounds like you're pissed, but I guess that's their thing. They're pissed and people are pissed, and I get it. When you're pissed, you can get real creative and maybe write some stuff. And I love the heaviness and the groove of some of the music, but the vocals, I can't
Yeah,
listen.
I'm the same. I love heavy metal, love hard rock, have for 40 years, but I can't make the leap to the growly vocals. Just can't. I've tried. I've listened to stuff, and like you say, there's some killer bands where the musicianship is jaw dropping, but as soon as the vocals come on, I'm kind of like, yeah, I'm done.
Yeah, I think the closest I've gotten is like, and I don't consider that very heavy, like Godsmack or something. But I guess maybe the closest one would be like for me, Bullet. And there's probably more bands like this. I just haven't found them. But like Bullet for My Valentine, they had that album called Fever, I think, and oh my God, that thing is just dripping with hooky melodies all over the place. So it's interesting because they'll have this rah 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 rah, on the brow, so it's got the mixture. And so you don't bring me pleasure. And they just got all these great melodies. So it's really heavy and it does have some aggressive vocal, but tons and tons of melody. And so that to me is okay. I could do that. I can do that. But I think if I were going to do that in a band, I'd have to have some dude that sings like that because I can't do the angry vocal stuff.
Yeah. Well, one of the songs that I love by you guys is "Bring the Hammer Down."
Yeah.
I mean, if I'm in the mood to get pumped up, I put on that song.
Yeah,
Like you say, it's aggressive, it's heavy, and vocally, I mean, the content of the song is aggressive, but yet it's got this huge chorus that gets stuck in your head, and
Yeah, but and topically, yeah, it's got that kind of, that is actually like the first song that I wrote for Riot. Because so what I did is when I first started recording, he gave me Metal Warrior and he gave me Ride Hard Live Free. Donnie did, and I put vocals on them. And then he kind of went away for a little while, and I was kind of like, well, I wonder what's going on. Well, he went to the record labels and showed them those songs just to get them fired up and see if they would, if we could, renew the contracts or whatever we had to do.
Yeah.
So in Japan and in Europe. And so unbeknownst to me, he was shopping using my voice, and I wasn't even in the band. I didn't even know what was going on. And then he came back and said, "Hey, let's work on some more stuff," And he started throwing music at me. And Bring the Hammer Down. I'm pretty sure Bring the Hammer Down was the first one that I wrote, where I wrote the vocal melodies and the lyrics to it. And yeah, I really love that song. The it's a little bit more of what we would call a plotter because it's kind of it's not
Yeah,
know.
right. Yeah.
But I tell you, after and it's not something that we play live right away. We've played it later, but actually Unleash the Fire is 10 years old, and we just got back from Europe, and we played Unleash the Fire. We played Bring the Hammer Down at some shows, and it's amazing that people are singing along with that bad boy now. Even actually that's kind of the featured song. So when we played the Rock Hard Festival, at first they had our entire hour and 15-minute performance up on YouTube. But now I didn't even know you could do it, but it's the same YouTube link, but now it's just a song. And it's Bring the Hammer Down. It's the song that they wanted to feature. And yeah, I love that song. I think it's a great song.
So you got, a pretty vast amount of albums out at this point, both your solo material and with Reverence and Jack Starr and Riot 5. And is there one that you're most proud of, or just a song that you're most proud of, or something that a favorite to play live?
Wow. I think for me, like on the solo album side of things, like I never even thought that I could write an album, you know what I mean? And then I could put out a solo album. And obviously, if I had to play all the instruments myself, the drums or whatever, I mean, I can only do it because other people can help me with it, obviously. I mean, I write the music, so but I have like an acoustic demo, and then somebody will turn it into a
Sure.
finished song for me. And so, yeah, I would say, it's such a tough question, but I would say some of my solo albums make me feel that way because I feel like, wow, I can't, I mean, I wrote all the vocal melodies, all the lyrics. I mapped out all the harmonies. I did this, I did that. I just, so I feel really proud of the fact of what I was able to accomplish with the songs, with those albums. But, I look at, some of the Jack Starr stuff and the Burning Starr stuff. I really like Land of the Dead. I think it's a great album. There's a little technical thing that bothers me on that album, but other than that, I mean, I think that's a great album. I love that song, Land of the Dead. Really the Riot stuff, I'm really proud of that. I'm really proud of the two Reverence albums too. I listen to the Reverence, and I'm like, God, I felt like I did a great job on those lyrics and vocal melodies. I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm surprised this didn't get bigger than it did. It feels to me like there's some really good songs on there. But so yeah, that's a tough one. But I think, God, I don't know. I guess I don't know what would be, my favorite song or anything. I'd probably, if I were going to pick one, I would probably pick, one of the songs off my, solo album, that's something that's more touching and written for my family or something like that.
This is a question just out of my curiosity because I always wondered. So, especially in this day and age when sort of making a career out of music is difficult because it's just not like it was in the 70s or 80s, or even the early 90s. So how do you balance, like you say, having a day job, so to speak, and a family, and then going to play in Greece? And I know you guys are going to Greece here soon, and Spain. And, how do you balance all that? Because I know for me, like, you only get so much time off from work a year, right? So, how do you work all that out?
It's an absolutely big challenge for, I think, probably any of the bands. I'm in a pretty blessed spot that what happened for me is, my music career blossomed then when I got into my 40s. So I was pretty established. So we have a family business. We manufacture bar and restaurant equipment. My dad started the company basically in 1969. He invented this automatic rotary glass washer and an automatic glass washer that they use in bars. It's like
Okay.
And from there, the company's grown to where we supply everything heavy equipment wise for behind the bar, and we manufacture it. So we're like a sheet metal fabricator. We make products, refrigerators, and all sorts of stuff. We have a little over 200 employees now. I've been working there since I was 14. So I started working there full time when I got out of college in '91. So yeah, by the time my music career started taking on, because at first 2008, 2009, it's one little trip here and there, whatever have you. So by the time Riot and stuff is happening, yeah, president of the company. I've been there a long time. I work on projects and strategic stuff. I'm not doing day-to-day work. If it would have happened in the 90s, like when the company was growing a lot and I was really instrumental to getting a lot of stuff done, I couldn't have done this. But for me, I'm older and more established. And so, but yeah, we struggle with that, even in Riot, Frank, the drummer, he's a school teacher.
Oh, really?
And
Oh, wow.
we had a 2 year, we wanted to put together this tour. We got offered the Rock Hard Festival. And so we tried to line up some shows before it. We ended up being 2 weeks for the show, which was too much for Frank. He couldn't get 2 weeks off. So we, had to get a fill-in drummer to try it and stuff like that. I mean, and I think the bigger thing that happens to the bands is, so what happens is a lot of times there's two issues. One, putting yourself in a spot where your employment is flexible enough that you can get time away. And then the other thing is that putting yourself in a spot where you can deal with the monetary issues.
Mm-hmm.
Because, you just don't always make a lot of money on these tours. It just depends, so, if you go away and you might go away for 2 weeks and you don't come home and you make $1,000 or whatever at the most, and for a lot of people, that's not enough really for what all the bills they have. And so we try not to make it about the money, and obviously going to Europe, we can get paid a lot for a festival, but then you're dropping $8,000 or whatever, just buying flights to get over there.
Exactly.
And then even you can have good weeks where you say, oh, I made $2,000 this week or whatever, but the problem is it's like 1 week in the middle of, the whole year, you know what I mean? So I think that's the part that's kind of hard. It's just, I guess if you're bigger, the funny thing for me is I don't even, like, I try to think about Riot and like, what would be the next level for us? And, getting a little bigger would mean, okay, maybe we can be out and play 3 months worth of shows or something a year. Cause I look at bands like Primal Fear and Hammerfall and stuff, and they're not out all the time, or whatever have you. And, how much bigger can we get and how much more can you go? And I don't, frankly, I don't even know how much money those bands make. But I mean, the trouble that I have is like, for me, I don't think I could really go to the next level. Like, in order for me to not work, I mean, I've got a very great situation. I can get a lot of time off work and be very flexible, but I'm definitely not going to quit my job for music, because it would have to just be something stupid, and nobody's going to offer me a couple $1,000,000 to come play in their band. You know what I mean? And
Sure.
that's probably what it'd be worth it for me to try to leave my job, just because my job is for as long as I want it, whereas that band, it could be hot today and dead tomorrow, so that's a tough part. But like the next level would be, you're gone for 3 months or 4 months and maybe you're making $50,000 a year or whatever. Well, that's, I got a wife and kids. That's not enough to, keep everybody, happy.
Exactly. Yeah. Cause that's just one thing, like say, I've always wondered about, because, I play in a band locally. We don't have to face the things of like, hey, can you come play in Spain for 3 weeks? I mean, so ours is like, we're weekend warriors, right? We go out and play on a weekend. And we're back home on Saturday night and go back to work on Monday. But yeah, I've always wondered, like say, bands of the level of Primal Fear and Hammerfall and those kind of bands, how they do it, and if they still have day jobs. I don't know.
Yeah, some of those guys, Ralph, I think a lot of those guys, what they do is, they're recording and they're doing music stuff that, they're either teaching and giving lessons, stuff like, so that's kind of what Mike, the guitar player, and even Nick, they give guitar lessons, and Mike has a music studio and has other people that come in and give lessons and stuff. So he's got a music studio. He does that. I know Donnie has his own kind of business where he preps bars for the evening. So he's got like a few different clients, and he goes around and gets the bars prepped, gets the, there's a certain amount of stocking of the liquor and accounting and filling tills or whatever and doing all that, getting them prepped for the night service. And, that's kind of his little business. And when he's gone, they just kind of get someone else to fill it in while he's gone and stuff like that. So yeah, you just got to be able to put yourself in a flexible arrangement. And then obviously you need a family that's supportive, it being gone, it can be terrible, on family life too, especially if your wife doesn't appreciate it, and doesn't support you in it,
Yeah. So kind of a tough question here, I guess, but what has metal or just, I guess, even just music in general meant to you throughout your lifetime? Obviously, it's given you opportunity to probably go places in the world you never would have went otherwise, right? You've got to see a lot of cool countries, go to these cool places, but what is music and metal meant to you?
I think it's funny because there's, I have been really productive lately, like if you look at like the last 10, 15 years, there's been a lot of albums. I mean, even just like solo albums. I actually have another one coming out with Kurt later this year. So that'll be like 5 solo albums basically in the last, since 2017. So in addition to 3 Riot albums and 3 Burning Starr albums and 2 Reverence albums. And so it's like, wow, and there's a part of me that I'm like, is this stupid? Especially my solo material. I'm not lighting the world on fire with it. Why do you go through all the effort, but it's hard, when you have that urge to create,
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of there, um, and in some ways it's depressing because the music scene's so different, but at the same time, the connection is interesting because you can have people from all sorts of weird parts of the world, and I don't mean weird in a bad way, but different parts of the world, faraway parts of the world, where they'll reach out to you and be like, "Oh man, I just love this album, or I love this song, or this song has meant so much to me." And I think that's it. I think as an artist, for me, like I just want to feel like, I mean, well, so first of all, I love to sing and I love to perform, and I would be stupid if I didn't like it when people say they think I have a great voice, and stuff like that. Obviously, I like that. I enjoy that. And I enjoy performing people. But the other thing is, I like to create. Like, I don't just want to sing. Like, every now and then it's like, hey, do you want to be in this tribute band and do this and do that? And that's cool. And it's kind of fun. But I really love to create. And I want to feel like I can touch people with my music. And so for me, reaching like 100 people with something that I wrote
Mm-hmm.
is more fun than reaching 100,000 people with a cover tune. You know what I mean? It's like, okay, and maybe I exaggerate slightly, but yeah, I think you get what I'm saying. It's like, I
Mm-hmm.
want to feel like for me, music has been like the soundtrack of my life. There are certain albums, and I'm sure you got to be the same way. And they're not always heavy metal albums. There's certain albums, like I remember the first Train album. I just loved it, and I was at a point in my life. It was kind of bachelor time, and I had some buddies. We were doing a lot of rock climbing, and we would take these road trips. And that first Train album, I would just listen to it a lot. And so for me, that album just takes me away to another time. And there's just a ton of albums like that throughout all of my life. And I think that's part of why, like, there's this feeling like, God, if I can do that for other people, that it would just be really cool.
Sure. And I think that's the thing that, fans get. I think me as a fan of Riot and other bands, I mean, the fan feels that connection, right? And then I think if the artist feels it, that's what it's all about. I mean, because especially in this day and age, it's not about making millions of dollars. That's just not going to happen unless you're Taylor Swift,
Yeah.
So you have to do it for the love of the music and the love of, meeting people and connecting with people. And
Oh, yeah. And and I think for me, that's why, like, my first solo album, I call it Sonic Healing. I mean, to me, music just has that ability to just transport people in different places to different places and stuff. And I think at this stage, like, I've gone through my stages where, we talk about the angry music and stuff, and I've written angry music and angry topics and whatever have you. And I wouldn't say I won't ever again or whatever have you, but at this stage of my life, I kind of want to lean more on the positive side. There's enough ugly, bad stuff around, whatever. So my hope is that, I can bring joy into people's lives. That's basically.
That's very cool. So obviously you've had chances to play at lots of different places. Is there a particular country or location or festival that stands out? Is it just some place you always like to play? Always have a, good time there, good crowd, good reaction?
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, a lot of them stick out, so it's hard to pick one that's your favorite. So I don't know if there are just kind of moments in time, so just like we were kind of laughing and we were talking about the Queensryche album, and we both love The Warning. And I'm like, look, I know it's not the best album. Obviously, Operation Mindcrime's probably better, really, and so is Empire, whatever. But for whatever reason, that one's special to me. And So to me, some of the shows that we've had can be the same way. So it's not like every show in Germany's awesome, but like we just played the Rock Hard Festival.
Hmm.
We played there in 2015. We played there at the end of a tour. We had like zero sleep getting to the show, and we went in and we just totally kicked ass. And so for this latest one that we just played, it was very similar. We had a 2-week run up to it, went through some stressful things, played. I had 5 shows in a row, so it was my 5th show in a row, and we just totally kicked ass. And so that and the way the bowl is designed of the venue and the 4,000 people, it's just, it's kind of hard not for that not to stick out to you. But what also sticks out to me is like, we played. There's this place called the 8 Ball Club in Thessaloniki, Greece, and it's not a really deep bar. It's not a very big bar really at all. But
Hmm.
what's interesting is up above there's like a balcony, but it's like a balcony with like a metal fence almost, you could say it, around it so you can't fall over, and that gets packed up with people, and this gets packed up with people, and like there's a little railing on the front of the stage, and when you go up there, like literally people reach up like that and they can grab your thigh, and they do.
Yeah.
They do while you're singing. And the whole time you're singing, people are crowd surfing and jumping up on stage and jumping on the crowd. And my God, did the Greeks sing along. So like every time I played there, even with Burning Starr, but with Riot too, like they just sing along so loud that it's like, how do you not, have a great time? There's another one in the place in Athens is a great one too, bigger club, but that one's really good. But I mean, we played just so many neat shows. I remember playing one in Colombia where they put us in this tiny little thing. The stage was made up of these little squares that were like a meter square, so roughly a little over 3 feet. And they put these squares together. And I remember they had like the drummer sitting there. Then they had 3 squares, one for Nick, Donnie, and Mike. And then they put a square in the front, and that was for me. And like, so it was like literally, I had kind of nowhere I could go. But I was sticking out front. And then the fans, the people in the club were like right next to my square and all around it and back in deep. And then up above us, there was a hole and there were fans all the way around up above us. So the whole time we're performing, people are going crazy and there's just people everywhere all around you. And then we played like Take Me Back, which is a song I wrote the lyrics for and vocal melody stuff for on Unleash the Fire. And they were singing along to it. I mean, these are people that don't even really speak English, a lot of them. I mean, they speak a lot of English and certainly a lot more than I speak Spanish. But that kind of stuff is just like, that really touches you. That sort of stuff is pretty mind blowing. Japan can be like that. We played some really nice shows in Japan. We played at the Satoyama Arena or something like that in front of 10,000 people. We played there. Also, Club Cheetah is a really great one. It's like 10,000 people. They call it a club, but it really is almost more like a theater. But you put 1,000 people in. That's where we recorded live, our Live in Japan 2018.
Okay.
So we've had some, and there it's like you actually feel, you go to the hotel and there might be a dozen people outside the hotel trying to get autographs and stuff, and when you get to it, they've got sushi backstage and everything's real professional. They bring you in and it's like, I mean, it's, so yeah, it's, so I would say, God, there's not a favorite, but there's just a lot of really cool, great memories, from all the different shows. It's amazing.
Yeah. Do you ever feel like it's kind of a pinch me moment? Because we were talking about earlier, some of these bands on the wall behind us growing up listening to Judas Priest or Queensryche or Iron Maiden or whoever. And now you've probably had chances to rub shoulders with some of your, idols, if you will, when you were a 15-year-old Todd. And so you still have to kind of pinch yourself sometimes to be like, I'm really doing this.
Yeah, I mean, I get moments, like not like I can name drop tons because the real big ones, like Rob Halford or somebody, they usually when they're real big, like Judas Priest, they kind of got things blocked off. You're not going anywhere near them, But when we played the Prague Power Festival down in Atlanta, we played that. Jeff Scott Soto came into our dressing room and he was like, "Hey Todd, what's up?" Or something like that. So he knew who I was, but he had seen me on The Voice, so I think that's why he knew who I was. And when I was on the Kiss cruise, Michael Sweet, when he walked up to me, he said, "Hey Todd," like that, and I was like, "Oh, that's cool," But we had been connected through our record label, so I mean that, so I doubt he really knew me much from music, but he said he was following me a little bit and saw some of the stuff I was doing. So yeah, so when you meet some people like that, I mean, obviously, to buy one of the funny ones is I told you that my buddy talked me into buying that Primal Fear album, and I think it was around '87, and it was like Black Sun or something like that. I can't remember the name of the album, and the stupid thing is, yeah, like 20 years later, I'm like sleeping below his bunk on a freaking bus for 30 days, that was pretty crazy, and now, yeah, he's like, a friend and a buddy of mine. So kind of, that part's kind of cool. Certainly, I mean, there's some of that even with Jack Starr, because obviously I bought his cassette in '84 and then ended up being in his band. And Manowar, like I can tell you, when I played the Magic Circle Festival, so obviously I recorded in the studio and Eric listened to me and I sat and talked to him and stuff. And then when we played in 2008, 2009, those cats would stand on the side of the stage while we were on the stage performing. You want to talk about a pinch me moment. I mean, that's, Manowar's, Manowar, okay, there's a cheese factor. I'll give it to you. But and here in the U.S., they might get derided, but man, they're huge in Europe, and they were maybe not quite as huge now, but wow, when we were playing those Magic Circle festivals in 2008, I mean, they're like Metallica big. They're as big in Europe as Metallica is in Europe. I mean, and maybe not quite as big, but that's how big they are. They're headline festivals. They're big. So yeah, so having Joey and Eric hang out on the side of the stage while I'm performing, that's pretty interesting. So.
Yeah, they're pretty cool.
And are
there any newer bands that you've seen throughout like your tours? Maybe you've caught somebody at a fest or anybody new that's just kind of, tripped your trigger a little bit. You're like, oh, that's a pretty cool band.
Yeah, there's been a few. I ran into God, I'm totally forgetting her name, but the gal that sings for Unleash the Archers.
Oh yeah, Brittany Slays.
Yeah, Brittany Slays. Thanks. She and I, like, somehow there was something on YouTube where she commented on a video and I commented, and I was like, oh, hey, cool. And then we ended up meeting on 70,000 Tons of Metal. She's badass. And they had a new album come out just recently. And man, they sold 3,500 copies of that album the first week, which in today's day and age is amazing.
Right.
It was really good. I was impressed. So yeah, I thought that was awesome. What's weird for me is there's, like, we just toured with this band and they opened up for us and they were called Tail Gunner. And I kind of heard younger kids. I mean, the one guitar player, Rhea, she was 19, soon to be turning 20. The other kids were maybe 27, and I think the oldest might have been 32. But it was interesting. They're all wearing their kind of faux black leather pants, and they got the high tops on. Almost, how Iron Maiden used to look back in the '80s. Yeah. Maybe they kind of still do. It's almost like that's the look they're going for, and it's just interesting. And they're out, and really even to see Craig, he had a pretty amazing voice. They would. They did a couple covers every night, and Painkiller was one of the ones they did. So he's got a pretty amazing voice. And just to see a younger kid, I mean, he's 27, so he's not that young. But to me, I'm 54, so it's half my age.
Exactly.
To see a younger kid who cares and took the time to learn how to sing head voice so that he could try to sound like 80s metal, that's pretty interesting to see, because you don't see as much of that. It doesn't seem like the kids are trying so much. Although in the foreign countries, they're more apt to try it,
Exactly. Yeah, I think there's been that resurgence the last few years of just traditional heavy metal, true heavy metal, whatever you want to call it. But there is really a resurgence of that with younger 20-something guys playing that style of metal and having that look, and
Well, that's the goofy thing, is they can come out and they can get bigger than you, but that's because they're young and people love young, and whatnot. Yeah. I mean, to me, and not that it's obviously the same genre, and I'm not slamming anybody, but Greta Van Fleet, and they're from basically a town over from me. They're from Frankenmuth. I'm from Saginaw. Frankenmuth's in Saginaw County, and what's interesting about them is, like, if you were 50-year-old dudes came out sounding like Led Zeppelin, and I know they can argue whether they sound like Led Zeppelin, but let's face it, they sounded a lot like Led Zeppelin, and that's really what kind of caught people's ear. And I'm not saying they're not great or whatever have you, but if I was a 50-year-old dude that came out sounding like Led Zeppelin, people are like, get the fuck out of here, what the hell is the problem? But when you're younger kids doing it, now it's really cool, you know. So
Yeah.
I thought kind of, and there's an element to that. Let's face it, you know, pop music and when I say pop music, I mean like popular in our culture. You know, our culture is a very youth-driven culture.
Sure.
And so if you're an older cat, man, you better be in a legacy band because it's hard to make it as an older cat, you know.
Yeah. Well, I had somebody recently tell me that Megadeth was dad rock, and I'm like, Megadeth? I mean, go back 30 years ago, 40 years ago, and that was stuff that was scaring people's moms, but now
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
dad rock, you know?
yeah, not dad rock. Well, I think probably to most kids nowadays, anything that's hard, anything that's rock is probably dad rock. You know, like what isn't? I mean, I don't know. It doesn't even feel like there's that much rock out there anymore. But I guess there's a few bands here and there. You know, it's like I said, it's so splintered nowadays. There's bands that are probably really successful doing it, but I just am not even aware of them. You
Yeah.
know. I think
Yeah.
that my brother exposed me to one band, just a rock band. It was like Tyler Bryant and the Shakedown or something like that. And I remember looking him up on Spotify. And I'm like, damn, he's got hundreds of thousands of monthly listeners. Like, wow, okay, cool. You know, so some of these people just surprise you. You know, so
Yeah.
I think that's the thing about nowadays is and that's where it's tough for older cats like me is, you gotta be more creative about the promo and I'm just lazy with social media and all that stuff. So it's like, it's hard, you gotta be making the stuff happen and working it and even to the point of advertising, there are Spotify curators that if you get on their list, they can expose you to a lot of people,
Sure.
part of the way you get on the list is connections but also money, and so there's that, and pushing, promoting your video on YouTube to try to get more views and doing this and doing that. And so I don't know, man. I don't know all the tricks. I'm the old school guy. We always thought, man, we just make good music and then someone else figures out how to help us promote it. We'll play live
Yeah,
shows.
exactly. Yeah.
But nowadays it's like you got to be the creator and you got to be able to edit videos. You got to be able to put out social media posts and take selfies and deal with all this other things that it's just not really up our sleeves for us old cats that don't want to learn new tricks.
Well, it's funny you said you're 54 because I'm 55, so we're cut from the same cloth and time frame there. But yeah, it's kind of like that hustle culture, right? You got to have that social media presence that shows how busy and active and fun your life is and whatever. But like you say, nobody wants to see that. Oh, had to mow the yard today. That's not exciting, but that's real life. And that's one thing I do think is cool about, we're talking about Ralph Sheepers. That's one thing I like about his social media is he's pretty much just real on there because he's posted where he's mowing the lawn. He's posted where he's taking his mom grocery shopping on Sunday. So,
I do see that. And
yeah,
he's really good about that. And it must work because he gains followers doing it. I think for me, what's weird for me is I'm kind of more like I just feel like people don't give a crap about that stuff. So like who wants to, you know what I mean? So that's why I feel self-conscious. I feel self-conscious taking a selfie to begin with.
right.
It's hard enough for me to want to do that and post it, but I feel like, well, nobody cares if I'm mowing the lawn or doing this or doing that, But I think that's the thing. It's like that's what's different about nowadays. They want to be. I had one younger kid when I was on The Voice. Obviously, I ran into lots of the younger kids that would do this stuff, and I remember the one younger guy saying, "No, no, man, they don't want to really because like to me, I want my video to look really professional." And I'm like, no, they don't want it, man. They want to feel like they're sitting in your living room, man. So like, you just put the camera on and just play them a song, and that's and it's like really, it's like okay. It's just hard for me to wrap my mind around it, because
Yeah.
to me, I come from the age where it was more like, there was this image that you kind of tried to present as part of the
Oh,
music.
yeah. Well, like rock stars were kind of untouchable and lived in this fantasy world the rest of us couldn't experience. But, I think in the last few years, you've kind of found out that was kind of a facade. Even like when Gene Simmons did his reality show, and you're like, well, Gene's just kind of this nerdy, dorky guy, I mean, who pretends to be the demon and all this and spit blood and breathe fire. But it's like he's just somebody's dad too,
Yeah.
So, yeah, I
Yeah.
think, people on social media, I think artists painting themselves in a realistic light, like, hey, I got to do the same things you have to do. I just get to maybe sing a song every once in a while,
Yeah. Well, and I get that. Like, I'm not trying to present myself. Like, I mean, I think I generally present myself as a very down to earth, average
Sure.
person. I think the trouble that I have is thinking that anyone gives a shit. that
Right.
I'm mowing the lawn. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like,
Yeah. Right.
like I mowed the lawn tonight, but I mean, I didn't take a selfie while I was doing it and post it because I figured nobody cares. You know, I
Yeah.
try to reserve my post for when I feel like I got something worth
Yeah.
saying or worth promoting or something.
No, I agree. It's just this weird balancing act with social media of,
It's tough.
yeah.
And for me, it's just my proclivity. Like, so I'm not saying anything Ralph's doing is bad or good or what, because I agree with you. I mean, to me, he's gaining followers, and I see a lot of his posts too because I follow him. So to me, and it's like, man, he's hats off to him, because like I don't feel I'm that creative or something. You know what I mean? I don't know. It's hard for me to even think about it. But yeah, I have seen the posts of him grocery shopping with his mom and stuff.
Yeah. I just thought that's pretty cool that, hey,
Yeah.
that's part of who he is, or he's lifting weights with his son or something, or,
Yeah.
whatever. I know Oscar from Hammerfall is the same way. He's always posting stuff of him and his son swimming or skiing or playing with the dogs in the backyard or, just normal like dad stuff,
Yeah.
So I
Yeah,
think that's,
I
yeah,
certainly had my share of that, soccer
yeah,
tournaments and all sorts of stuff. So, but
yeah.
yeah,
Well, hey, I look at some of my favorite bands, like you say, the Maidens and the Saxons and the Priests and these guys who were still touring at 70, 71, 72 and still bringing it. I just saw Saxon week and a half ago, and I mean, they kicked butt, they were great.
yeah,
So,
yeah, we played with them last fall, and I thought the same thing, man. Biff came out, and we played the Keep It True Festival or something like that, Keep True Rising. And we played the one night, we did the whole Thundersteel album, but the night before, Saxon headlined it. And actually, like Nigel, the drummer, he and Donnie are friends because
okay.
they both live in the kind of Texas area, and so they know each other. And so obviously I know Nigel. I've met him through Donnie, so we were talking to him backstage. And I've met Biff, like I took a picture with him, but like
Hmm.
he doesn't know me from Adam, so and I wouldn't even try to go talk to him, if you know what I mean. I wouldn't want to interrupt him or anything. But watching him on stage, I was just like kind of amazed because he's still hitting some high notes and stuff, and I'm just
Yeah.
like, and he's what 70, 72 or something like that. I'm like,
Yeah.
damn. What I thought was interesting is he had this double-breasted military-looking long coat thing, and he wore it the whole time, and it
Yeah.
was hot in there. I'm just like,
Exactly. He did the other night too. I'm like, I thought he'd shed it after 2 or 3 songs. He wore it the whole show.
how is he not sweating his ass off? I don't know, but
Yeah.
yeah, it's amazing to see this stuff.
Well, I tell you, I don't know how old Nibs is, Nibs Carter, the bass player, but I don't know anybody who headbangs as hard as that guy,
Oh man, I had to
Yeah.
give up on that. That's like it's so easy to throw your neck out nowadays doing that. That's a young guy's game right there, especially
Yeah.
whirling around stuff.
Well, Nibs takes off whenever they play Heavy Metal Thunder and that song kicks in, and he just takes off running across stage and headbanging. I'm like, man, how does he walk the next day? I'd have to have a couple of days off or something.
Well, it probably helps if you're not singing a lot. I know as a singer, if you start running across the stage too much, you get winded and you're going to get smoked in a hurry because you need the breath to be able to support the note. Well, certainly for a Riot set, I know when you're singing that high. I mean, if you're maybe a lounge act, fly me to the moon, maybe you can run all over that. But in general, you need breath, and that's one of the troubles you have with with power metal in general. A lot of times there's just the lyrics keep coming, and so you don't get a lot of little breath breaks. And when you do, it's like, you got to be quick with them. And so the last thing you want to do is start running around. I try to move around the stage pretty good, but I've had that a couple times where I get a little too excited. And I know when we played that Japan show in front of 10,000 people back in 2014 or 15, I remember getting real excited and starting to run up back and forth on that stage. And I remember like during a musical section, going back behind one of the amps and just being like, "All right, Todd, calm down," just kind of get all zen because I was like, "You gotta get some breath going." I felt like I'm losing it here. So yeah, it's definitely it's like a science to be able to reproduce these kind of vocals, and I don't mean mine, but just heavy metal in general, and where you're at the limits of your vocal range. It's hard to do that and then be able to do it the next night and the next night and the next night and not lose it. You got to be very, very careful and very
Sure.
so.
Well, Todd, I know I've kept you quite a while here, but it's been great talking with you. I really do appreciate it, and you're just open just to discuss everything. Is there anything you want to say at the end to any listeners or fans or maybe new fans who, haven't heard of you before and this is their introduction to you?
Well, hey, I just appreciate you taking the time to listen. I sometimes die laughing because I just talk so much. I'm a long talker, I think, from Seinfeld episode or something. But just really appreciate the sport and the listens and all that. And just released the new album Mean Streets with Riot 5. A lot of people call it Riot V, but it's actually Riot 5. The V's a Roman numeral, and represents the fifth chapter because I'm the fifth singer of Riot, really, the fifth to record albums with them anyway. And but yeah, we got this new album Mean Streets out, and a lot of people been digging it. So I encourage people to give it a listen. And if you're into kind of classic rock inspired stuff, I have a solo album called Sonic Healing that I wrote along with Kurt Vanderhoof. So maybe give that a listen. And I've got another one with him that's going to be coming out later this fall. So much. And, just thank you for people that support the music and appreciate you, giving it a listen and giving it a shot. That's what we do it for.
Yeah, that's right.
Keep
Well,
doing
thank you,
it.
Todd, very much, and thank you for anybody who's out there watching and listening. I appreciate anybody who's actually taking the time to watch these videos and listen. And hopefully, it's turning you on to some new bands maybe you haven't checked out and some new music. And it's this thing we all love called heavy metal and hard rock. So we will see you next time. And thanks so much, Todd.
All right. Thank you, Wade.